Good evening. This is the El Paso Board of Trustees, a special meeting concerning the budget. If anybody wants to follow along on the internet, they can go to www.youtube.com/user/go-EPCC. I want to welcome everybody here tonight. Bill, go ahead and do the roll call.
Miss Bonnie Robles. Miss Nahida.
Here.
Mr. Archer.
Here.
Mrs. Robles.
Here.
Mr. Hadley.
Here.
Dr. Graham and Miss Sanchez will be here later.
Okay. Well, we have four, so we have four. So, all right. Do we have any public comment?
No.
All right. Okay, read number 5, please.
Yes. Section 5, discussion and action items. Item 5.1, Mr. Fernando Flores, Interim Vice President of Financial and Administrative Operations, will provide an update on the budget development process for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Chair Haggerty and members of the board, before Mr. Flores gets started, I want to thank you for taking time to come out today. We have also reached out to board members to ensure that your availability, we will have another, the final from my perspective, board budget workshop on the 17th of August. That's a week from tomorrow. At that point in time, we believe that we'll be ready to make a recommendation for the board to move forward with both salary enhancement as well as the budget for the year. But we did want to provide another opportunity to review the budget and see where we are and see what our recommendations. We have much more information from the state that is waiting approval by the coordinating board on August the 22nd. But we believe that we're in good shape. We're ready to move forward with that. With that, Judge, I'll turn it to Mr. Flores.
Thank you, Dr. Serrata. Chair Haggerty, members of the board, Dr. Serrata. I will be presenting today a preliminary budget for fiscal year 23-24 for the unrestricted operating budget. So the agenda that we're going to follow today is we're going to provide an update on budget development process for fiscal year 23-24. And then we're going to update the 23-24 projected revenues and preliminary baseline budget based upon new information that we've received now on revenues. And then we're going to move to the preliminary funding strategies for fiscal year 23-24. They're going to provide some options to support the budget for next year. Then, if you would like an update on the 4-year financial model, we will provide you that. And then we'll look at next steps for budget adoption. So the budget development process that we're going to talk about today is, as a way of review, we provided a budget workshop on June 30th of this year, and at that point we had very preliminary revenue numbers. So everything was very speculative at that time. We were waiting for the tax certification, the appropriation to become clearer, and look at how fall enrollment was doing. And then we're going to talk about the baseline budget that has been now updated through July 31st, which reflects people that have left the college and people that have been hired, and adjustments to the baseline budget rolling forward. And we have now completed review of the additional funding request, and those will be reflected in a slide shortly. Then we're going to project revenue for fiscal year 22-23, and then for 23-24, because that becomes the basis for next year's budget. We're going to look at some revised funding strategies based upon updated revenue projections, which we were lacking at the June 30th budget development presentation. Then if you would like a presentation on the updated 4-year financial model. So we're going to take a quick look at where we stand right now. This is the same chart that we presented on June 30th, but it has been updated through June 2023. What this chart reflects at the very bottom is that we're projecting revenues for this year of $164,649,944, a variance of $6,506,810. That variance is largely attributable to interest income. So if you look at the other income line, that's where interest income is. Rates have been moving quite quickly this year, so it has created that positive variance. That has resulted in an increase over the adopted budget of 4.11%.
I got a question on the HERF revenue recovery. That 786,000, do we have to spend it by any time, or do we lose it, or?
What happens with that, Mr. Haggerty, is that is a positive revenue variance. We have brought in more than we budgeted. Consequently, what will happen to that, if we don't spend it, it rolls into fund balance. So it helps us with fund balance.
Is that the HERF revenue recovery?
Yes, sir, it is. So that was budgeted at $11.1 million, $11,104,387. We realized $11,880,724. That's what created that positive variance.
Was it formula driven rather than an absolute number?
It was driven by the enrollments. We took a base period of 2019 enrollments compared to the various semesters this year, and the variance resulted in us being allowed to claim more lost revenue than we were anticipating.
Okay, so it's based on attendance.
Yes, sir. So overall, shows projected revenues compared to adopted budget coming in higher. So this next slide shows a projection where we're going to end the year. On this particular slide, you see a continuation of the amount on the previous slide, which reflected projected revenues of $164,649,944. And so we're projecting expenses of $134,762,358, leaving an increase of revenues over expenditures of $30,441,110. We are anticipating a small decrease related to the self-supporting programs, $153,524. We anticipate an increase of $29,887,586 for the year. So the increase from at the end of the year, if we need to transfer money to the project reserve for capital projects, recall that in January you received a multi-year capital project plan that Mr. Labato presented for 3 years. That is how those projects get funded. In the absence of a bond issue, we take surpluses and we either put it into fund balance or we do a transfer to project reserve to support capital projects. So right now it looks very good for the institution because we're projecting that fund balance increase to be used for either project reserves or to support fund balance.
On our expenses, how come we're down $14 million? Did we just misestimate the expenses, or what caused the expenses to be 14?
So
13.58.
So largely those surpluses that we have are due to salary savings by not hiring part-time faculty that we have planned in case of an enrollment increase. So we don't touch those monies unless we need them. So salary surpluses, but a big part of that is the HERF money on the revenue side of $11.8 million. That is additional HERF revenue that we didn't plan to spend either. We put that into a biennium reserve, the HERF money. So that's part of that large difference. And the rest is due to salary savings or staying under budget in the various areas. The various areas are very prudent about spending their budget only as designed at the beginning of the year to support their areas.
How much of that is attributed to staffing positions that we fund but don't ever hire people for?
So the vacant positions, Laura, we are running at about $9.2 million, somewhere in that range.
So we're having, with Ms. Sanchez not here, we're having a slush fund of $9 million.
No, sir, those positions are planned to be recruited. And so it's incumbent upon each area to follow through and recruit for those. And I know that even though they're indicated on the vacant list right now, many of them are in the process of being recruited. So the strategic planning going forward for the year, I'm planning for revenues. State appropriations were based on the 88th legislature, which was historic in nature, and we will see the dollar amounts shortly that resulted in. We received a preliminary run of what to expect on July 14th of our appropriation. And as Dr. Serrata mentioned a little while ago, the final numbers for the appropriation will be provided to us on August 22nd before we adopt the budget on August the 30th. So if we need to change any numbers, which we don't expect, we'll have time to adjust the budget before it's presented on August the 30th. Revenue projections exclude the HERF revenue recovery because the HERF grants ended June of this year. So that's a significant change to the budget. We removed $11.1 million from the budget. Tuition and fees are based upon the tuition rate schedule effective fall of 2022 and current year enrollment. We always budget very conservatively for tuition and fees. We base it upon current enrollment. And even though right now enrollment is trending about 7% higher, we still have time to go before that enrollment period ends. We are not increasing what we budget for tuition and revenues based upon that, but just in terms of giving you an indication of what enrollment is doing now.
Did we hit our numbers for the summer?
We were up for the summer, Judge. We were up 4% for summer.
And you're projecting a 7% increase?
No, we're not projecting a 7% increase. We've actually budgeted flat based on tuition, but we are currently trending 7% ahead of last year. Now that is before we do any drop for non-payment. Drops for non-payment will range between 2 and 3%, so we're still trending about 4% up.
Property taxes, now we received the certified valuations on July the 25th. And so those numbers have been provided to us in a final form. So the valuation resulted at, for property valuation, is $61.5 billion to include new property of $1.4 billion. So the property valuations continue to grow in El Paso. They're growing about $6 billion a year. Over the last 3 years, from 21 to 23, we've increased about $6 billion in the valuations. It has resulted in a no new revenue tax rate of 11.5717 cents per $100 valuation. Planning for additional funding needs to be decided in the future is a consideration of a salary enhancement for employees. Also to be considered are the additional funding requests from the executive levels, which you will see on a chart shortly. And also continued impact of the Governmental Accounting Standard Board's GASB 68 and 75. That's related to the pension and health insurance unfunded liability that the state pushed onto our books. So that results in expenditures to us every year. And so we cover that with budget surpluses. That's how we've been covering it in the past. But that is something we have to do. We don't have a choice. That's mandated.
Quick question
Yes, sir.
for Dr. Serrata. This legislature came through with a bunch of extra money this year, but each biennium, is it a fight all over again, or does this establish a higher base for the succeeding years?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mr. Uxer. So what we will do is we will be competing against ourselves. And so it is an outcomes-based funding model that focuses on credentials of value or high demand areas, successful transfer, and dual credit with a purpose. As long as our metrics continue to rise, then we should do well with regards to state appropriations. Legislators were clear to point out that we shouldn't expect this, and what we indicated to them is we're changing the funding mechanism. And so whether the state is flush with resources or if the state is tighter with resources, we will be funded based on an outcomes formula. However, we will be competing with ourselves annually. So it'll be a 3-year rolling average or the most recent data, whichever is more positive for the institution.
But the legislature is not going to come back and say 100 million for the community college. They're going to say, this is your formula, and as long as if we keep consistent performance, then we should have consistent revenue.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it will become annual. It will no longer be, we will be competing with ourselves annually as opposed to biannually. So we'll see what we produce, and then next year, right now we're looking at approximately 7.1 million additional dollars in state appropriations. Next year, it could go down, it could go up.
What kind of lead time do you have?
It'll be based on what we're producing.
No, I mean, if for this year, if I'm based on this formula, how long will it be? Will I know in February what I will be able to spend in September? Or is it March, or?
We should know in February. Yeah.
So you have like 6 months lead time?
Yes.
So as a refresher, these next two slides, you saw them on June 30th, but we have them here just as a reminder. The historic change related to the way the appropriation is changed. The legacy model that we had in the past was based upon success points, core operations, and contact hours. The new model has a base tier, which basically covered the smaller community colleges that saw a decrease in appropriation. This is the way the state helped them with their appropriation. We are not in that category, the base tier. But that was one piece of the new funding model, helping smaller colleges. We are impacted by the performance tier, as Dr. Sata was just saying. It's going to be based upon outcomes, and those outcomes have weights associated to them. So the new model is a lot more complicated than the old model. So it is very different. It is very different. And this is the criteria under outcomes, credentials of value awarded in high demand fields, students who transfer with at least 15 semester credit hours, and so forth are the criteria for outcomes. And so this is the basic appropriation right here, the outcomes and the weights. And then for the first time ever, there's going to be funding related to dual credit early college high school students. This is the FAST, or financial aid for swift transfer appropriation, that Dr. Serrata was just speaking about. And this is related to dual credit students in early college high school. So this is a new financial aid program that would allow economically disadvantaged students to enroll in dual credit classes at no cost to them. We are already doing that, but this is codifying to support the appropriation the students that qualify for this award.
What is that number?
And go
Going
ahead.
fast? It's based currently, Judge, the appropriations that the state's looking at is based on 45% of students enrolled in dual credit are economically disadvantaged. And so they've done that across the state. The allocation, the projected allocation to the college is about $2.1 million. So that's based on 45% of the students being economically disadvantaged. Region 19, 74% of students are economically disadvantaged, are on free and reduced lunch. So we anticipate that we should be between the 45 that the state has, we believe that we'll be up to about 65% of the students that will be eligible. And so we'll be funded at a higher level than the state estimates. That's our approximation. This will not come through, though, until after census date in the fall. And it'll be broken up by term. So the 2.1 million was based on a yearly allocation. And so the state will look at where we are. They'll get the information from the Texas Education Agency. That will go to the coordinating board. The coordinating board will receive the resources from the FSP grant, the Foundational School Program grant from TEA will be transferred to the coordinating board. The coordinating board will then distribute those resources to the colleges.
So they'll make the final decision what the percentage rate is.
It'll be based on what TEA reports. Correct.
How do you know economic, does each student have to fill out some form? Is it similar to FAFSA?
I will defer to Dr. Graham on how the district
That's a different
refers.
form for the meals under the nutrition department.
But it's, I mean, the FAFSA sort of says, hey, what's your economic standing in the family? This is sort of a similar, this is time form.
It's not as complicated, it's a one-pager, and the family pretty much reports whether they have a certain amount of income, and it's immediate. So it's not for the past 2 years or whatever, it's what the family is receiving right now to determine if the students are eligible for free or reduced lunch, or if they are not.
Now the question is, do we supply enough people, advice, and support so that every student that can be classified as potentially gets all the help they need to be able to fill it out correctly?
So that is done at the school district, and my understanding is it
Okay,
is.
so that's a school, that's a
Correct.
school.
It's part of the registration process.
Okay.
So they have to fill it out, but it's very quick and simple. It's not complicated form.
That's correct. And then that information will be transferred from TEA to the coordinating board along with the resources that will then be distributed to the institutions.
But that's the school, we just need to make sure they do it right.
And it's going to be that, have they been on free or reduced lunch at any time in the last 4 years? It's not just the most recent data.
So if they're currently not on free or reduced
But
lunch,
they
but
were-
2 years ago,
They would qualify.
qualify?
That's correct.
So part of the process for setting the rules, there was a committee appointed by the coordinating board to set the rules how to implement these historic changes. And so that committee is led by Dr. Serrata, the rules-making committee. Consists of 5 college presidents, 5 CFOs, and 1 person from the CE area. And they're the ones that are creating the rules related to the outcomes and applying that towards the appropriation. And as a reminder, also benefits, we're still waiting for the health insurance appropriation. It is not known at this time. We expect it to come in the same as last year.
You don't think there'll be an increase on that?
I don't, because they've announced that the actual rates have not changed. Yep. And lastly, on this slide, there is going to be an increase in the state contribution rate for TRS from 8% to 8.25%. We expect a nominal impact, a very small impact to our budget, very small. So the draft funding model released on July 14th, that'll be submitted to the coordinating board and then sent for approval and hopefully approved by August the 22nd. So the numbers that we're going to present to you on the appropriation were based upon that run on July 14th. The revenue numbers for appropriation we have in here are based upon that initial run on July 14th. And then should there be any changes, they'd be reflected on August the 22nd. August the 22nd, if there's any changes to our appropriations, we'd be able to adjust our budget for whatever that is before we present the budget for adoption on August the 30th. So those are the key dates going forward for the appropriation. And then they'll implement the emergency rules to implement this model. So the base tier, EPCC is not eligible for that because of our large tax base and our enrollment. The performance tier, we have been, we have $38,675,854 that the college is hoping to receive for that July 14th run, and that's an increase of 22.6%. It's one of the larger amounts in the top 10 community colleges, and that has information from performance metrics that Dr. Penley's area pulled together and sent to the state for creating our appropriation. And so that is quite a large increase, 22.6, but it reflects well on the college in the direction of courses that we are providing to our students because they're eligible for appropriation reimbursement. And so our base appropriation is $31,545,292. On top of that, to get us to the 38, is the performance part of that appropriation that we're getting, the 7.1 that Dr. Serrata mentioned a little while ago, based upon performance metrics. And so future appropriations, and this is very important and considered in our budget development, future appropriations will depend on performance metrics being met after 2024. So how we build our budget needs to consider that every year we're going to have to be reporting, and based upon those hours and those metrics, it'll determine our next appropriation. In the past, we always would hear biennium appropriation, good for 2 years. That is no longer the case. So that does impact the way we budget, and it's very important to this discussion. Final appropriation to be set August the 22nd. And so the FAST appropriation, the financial aid for SWIFT transfer, projected to be between 2.1 million and 2.4 million. It's projected a little higher because our community should have more economically disadvantaged students that qualify, which is a good thing for us. So we hope our appropriation will be a little bit higher. We're budgeting $2 million for this in our budget. And we're doing that because that's going to be based upon our actual enrollments in the fall. And we don't know what those are yet. So we're being conservative in our budget development and budgeting $2 million for the FAST appropriation.
So we're projecting 2.1 to 2.4, but we're only going to count two even.
Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, on the performance tier, what's a plus or minus on that? You think 38.6 million plus or minus 1% or 5%?
No, it won't move. It should stay there. It's based on the latest year or a 3-year average, which ran from 2021 and 22.
So that's a fairly solid number. Too.
As long as the coordinating board approves the emergency rules.
So once approved, the fiscal year 24 funding is set for the entire year unless some errors are discovered by the coordinating board. So once we get our appropriation, that should be it for 1 year. Both base tier and performance tier funding to be recalculated each year to account for availability of new data. In other words, it's not on a biennium anymore. It's on a 1-year basis.
What are, back first, what are errors? I mean, some
So,
errors, like, that's sort of like, yeah, this is what it is, but I reserve the right to change it because.
if we reported certain hours and we later discover that we should not have reported them, then we self-report. And we take that approach to self-report, but it's better to us point out errors instead of them discovering them later.
But it's mostly hours, student enrollment hour kind of thing.
That's correct.
So the fiscal year 25 appropriation will not be lower than the $31,545,292. That's our base appropriation, but recall we're getting 38. We're getting 38. So our base, next year's budget, we can count on the 31,545. That's what we can count for next year. Then we have to earn the performance tier based upon the metrics.
Dr. Zarate, a question. With so much of the funding riding on the outcomes-based model, what are you doing to make sure that everybody understands that, especially our instructors and everybody, actually, all of us?
Now, it's a great point, Dr. Graham. So during the spring town halls, House Bill 8 was well on its way. I presented this at each of the respective campuses, providing our constituents, whether it be faculty, staff, or administrators, an overview of how we were looking at the funding mechanism shifting. In our State of the College address that we'll go forward with beginning in September, I will once again share the information. Each of the vice presidents and the cabinet members have also shared this with their respective teams. I'd asked Dr. Smith to chime in. I know that he held a leadership retreat. I attended part of his leadership retreat to provide an overview of where we were headed with funding so that we're all rowing in the same direction and ensuring that we're doing what's best for students as well as to maximize the funding opportunities for students. There are some pieces of this particular funding process that it's not just traditional credentials. There's a lot of non-credit credentials that will be counted. So occupational skills award, institutional courses leading to a certificate. We're only going to provide occupational skills awards that will provide a living wage for our students. There are some colleges that are providing occupational skills awards that, from my perspective, are not in the spirit of House Bill 8. I just don't feel comfortable moving forward in that direction. The cabinet agrees. We're going to provide these credentials to students, but credentials that will increase their wages, not just credentials that we can offer.
Who determines whether those are acceptable or not?
Right now, Mr. Uxer, the non-credit reporting in particular is very new to the state. And so we've been working with Commissioner Keller and his staff. You had the commissioners that were part of the Finance Commission. That was the one that Mr. Hunt chaired. In addition to that, the commissioner has been meeting with a group of presidents probably for a year and a half now. I've been privy to that. I've been a part of those meetings. They are comprised by the TAC officers, the Texas Association of Community College officers, and then each of the members that were on the commission as well. And we've been providing guidance to Commissioner Keller and his staff on these particular awards to ensure we'll have more time. We had to move quickly to get them in place so that we can move forward with the formula on the 22nd of August. We will continue to modify the formula and provide more guidance on what truly are the credentials that should be counted.
So the coordinating board will be the ultimate authority.
That's correct. Yeah, Commissioner Keller and his team will provide that information to the legislature and they'll move forward with those. Dr. Smith, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I could probably talk for a little while, so cut me off if you need to. We're being pretty proactive around House Bill 8 as soon as we started to see the draft legislation. As Dr. Strada alluded to, we had a leadership retreat. We spent a half a day talking specifically about the bill and our current programs. In fact, this morning we had a leadership team meeting. It's a standing agenda item. So what we're doing is we're taking our current programs, our first prong stab at this, and looking for embedded occupational skills award or credentials of value within current programs. We also have a list of about 20 programs that are in development now. And so we'll be looking at those through the lens of House Bill 8 funding as well. The deans have been asked at the start of the semester to engage with the district-wide coordinators so that faculty is involved. And remember, all of this happening in the summer. So as faculty come back and return, they'll be working with the district-wide coordinators to look at our current programs. And then we've asked all the programs that have an advisory committee to put that on the agenda because, to your question, Mr. Uxer, those are largely regionally defined, those OSAs and credentials of value. And at some point,
Occupational Skills Award. Okay.
so in a nutshell, they're micro-credentials, sets of 3 or 4 courses that we put together that grant some sort of skill that's valuable to industry. And so each advisory committee will also be addressing it. The thought there is that one way to justify that it's a regional need is for those advisory committee members to weigh in on it. So being quite proactive about it, as Dr. Strada alluded to, new territory is largely in ADP Primozich's area where we're looking at CE courses that are also now eligible potentially for funding that weren't eligible in the past. And then ultimately how that will tie into our credit programs potentially as well. So pathways for students to start in CE and look at OSAs or credentials of value there, transition to actual credit certificates and degrees and transfer. Those are all points that are fundable under the new model.
Do we have any programs at the college now where somebody graduates that doesn't make a living?
It's a great question, Judge. So what we're looking at right now is every credential that the institution currently offers is considered a credential of value. Commissioner Keller and I have had extensive conversations on this, and I've provided examples. So for instance, childcare. We're very proud to produce childcare providers that earn their credentials at the institution. The fact that society writ large chooses not to value childcare providers and pays them significantly less, from my perspective, than a living wage would not serve our community well if we chose to pull back and no longer offer that program. The for-profits will continue to offer that program, and the students will still earn the same wage. So currently, every credential that the institution currently offers is considered a credential of value. Now we have the high demand areas, nursing, welding, and those will have a premium attached to those, but currently every program we offer is considered a credential of value. Now the goal will be, and from my perspective, is to ensure that those continue to be credentials of value.
Just out of curiosity.
Yes, sir.
Are any of our programs oversubscribed? I understand that the nursing program is, you have a waiting list for it, so are we working toward expanding the capability there?
So I'll defer to Dr. Smith, but I would add, the nursing boards are very clear about what is required in order to expand. It's, if I'm not mistaken, a 12-to-1 faculty ratio. It is become more difficult to recruit and retain nursing faculty. Dr. Smith is putting together a proposal for me to consider on how we can continue to attract nursing faculty. So it's a twofold response. Right now, we're limited based on the size and scope of the facilities that are needed, despite our expansion of the facilities at the Rio Grande campus. But in addition, we're also limited based on the nursing board and how much we can expand on those. Dr. Smith, please.
Yeah, the good news is in many of the health occupations area, we have increased capacity. Those are largely under Dr. Hajar's area, respiratory care, PCT, those kind of programs. Echocardiography is a new program, and we're expanding. Thanks to the board approving some equipment at the last board meeting, we're expanding capacity there. Nursing's a tough nut to crack. We are looking at a night LVN program to be offered out at the Mission Del Paso campus, but recruiting nursing faculty is an ongoing challenge.
What kind of requirements on the faculty? In other words, you go to Providence Hospital and you talk to some of them and they say, yeah, I work 3 days a week on a shift work, and then I have several days off. Do we have the ability to work with people that actually have nominal first full-time jobs? I mean, can we?
They could serve as adjuncts. They wouldn't be able to serve as full-time faculty members, but they could serve as adjuncts.
Yeah, and we actually have many faculty doing exactly that. And so in their free time, they come and teach adjunct for us in the mission program. We continue to look at it. We're ready to present a proposal to Dr. Strada for retention of nursing faculty. It's a highly specialized area, as you know, and it's tough to recruit people like some of the other areas that we're having trouble with college.
We're talking nursing, but do we see the same kind of performance and demand for diesel mechanics and for welders and stenographers and
Diesel mechanics and welders for sure. We're seeing a high demand for those particular areas currently, and we continue to see those. As I'll point out to the board, our career technical education, of which nursing is one of those programs grew every term of the pandemic, and they continue to grow. Now, credit to the board for the master plan that was put in place and the facilities that we built, expanded our capabilities within those respective programs. So those have continued to be high demand from 2020, before 2020, and they grew even more during the pandemic and continue to be in high demand. Currently, our career technical education programs are trending, I believe, 17% up. Versus academic programs that are trending, they're 13% up right now, and academics are 6% up. So those continue to have high demand in those particular areas, writ large across most of those. I'm not sure about stenography.
Yeah,
If you don't mind.
that is a pretty steady demand. Court reporting is the closest thing we have to that, where they do transcription and translation and closed captioning and that sort of thing. That's a pretty steady state program at this point. Passing the national exams for that program is quite challenging. And so I don't see, while the students do well when they graduate, I don't see an expansion of that program happening in the near future.
Do our salaries compare to everybody else so that we can attract?
I'll let Dr. Strada address.
Our answer is that no. I'm
I
sure you
think
get that
there's
data.
some room, especially in high demand fields like nursing, for alternative proposals.
I mean, the for-profits, do they pay their teachers higher?
There are programs in the region that, for instance, provide a sign-on bonus. We do provide supplements for our faculty in certain programs, including nursing, above their base salary. And so the question becomes, is that supplement adequate? Is it appropriate for the region, et cetera? So that'll be part of the proposal that we present to Dr. Strada in the next few weeks.
These are great questions, and I really love them and the answers, but I think we really should give an opportunity for Mr. Flores to continue his presentation. And,
Well,
he
I
went
have some
really
questions
far.
too. I have some questions though about this is what it's for.
Well, I understand that, but we're going on and on about,
Well,
other things.
You don't like my
other
questions?
Well, it's not that I don't like your questions, I would just love to give him the opportunity to present.
he has all too, would you? I think just as a point of observation, that one of the things that we offer is that there are those retirement programs that the for-profits don't offer.
So somebody full-time here has the ability to have a retirement program, a medical program, which I think need to be considered. Go ahead.
So moving down the chart here, so every year is now a base year. That's the message that we're trying to drive with the new format of the appropriation. And Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board plans to approve fiscal year 24-25 final rules in January and April of 2024 respectively, which tells you everything is still moving. There's still a lot of movement going on in this arena. And lastly on this slide, as part of the overhaul of the appropriation, they also took a look at how they send us money for the appropriation. And historically, they would send us 10 payments a year for the appropriation. And they've changed that a little bit. They're going to give us 50% in October 15th of each year. And then after that, 2 more disbursements of 25% in February, and then 25% in June of each year. So that changed a little bit as well, along with everything else.
Does that bother our cash flow?
It's going to help us because actually Dr. Zata was part of that as well.
And this came to the rules, this came to the Community College Finance Advisory Committee. I chair the committee. I was wise to ask Mr. Flores and his colleagues on cash flow, exactly what you're referencing, Mr. Uxer, to figure out what was the best interest of our institutions. We're a larger community college. We made sure that we adhered and listened to the small and medium colleges in particular. So if you look at it at the start of the year, we have tuition revenue that's coming in. And then October was the right point. We decided to have half of the resources distributed in October. Then cash flow starts to be an issue in the February timeframe. And then finally, we did it in June. We used to have a 10-pay system, and we're reducing that to 3 now.
Thank you, Dr. Serrata. So then we get to the revenue projections supporting the budget that's going to be up for your consideration. So here we see preliminary numbers, which we think are pretty solid at this point. So looking at the projected revenues compared to the adopted budget on the state appropriation line, you see the impact of the new appropriation. So we're expecting $40,675,854 compared to the 22-23 operating budget that we're currently in. That's going to be an increase of $9,082,937. Overall, 28.75% increase from the year before. That's quite substantial. And then a big change from the adopted budget for 22-23, we're losing the HERF lost revenue recovery. We've enjoyed that for the past 3 years, and so all good things, at the end of June, are done. So that's a significant change from one year to the next. So we're losing that in the budget. And so overhead recovery, a small variance, small decrease of $17,337. Moving to the other revenue categories, tuition and fees, we expect a decrease of $1,024,734. Part of that is a decrease in distance ed fees. We projected that some of the students are moving back to face-to-face. So we had a distance ed fee for anybody taking classes online. And so we had budgeted an increase in distance ed fees the year before because so many people stayed online. And so we're seeing a little bit of a shift back to face-to-face. I think, 42% of our students are trending towards online versus 58% to face-to-face, something like that. I don't know if Dr. Smith has, I'm getting a thumbs up back there, so that's the change in tuition and fees in the coming budget year. On property taxes, we see an increase of $2,680,682. Just want to emphasize that is not a tax increase. Just want to emphasize that to everyone. That is attributable to new property. And then other income, we have a slight increase there. That increase would have been larger, but the college has moved to budget for the FAST appropriation, the financial aid for swift transfer. So we removed some revenue we were getting from the school districts because we were recouping the instructor cost whenever we provided the instructor. But now, since we're going to get the FAST appropriation for dual credit students, we are realizing a large increase on the state appropriation. And then on the other income, we adjusted the budget down because we're losing that revenue for billing the school districts. But embedded in that is an increase related to interest income, which is offsetting some of that. And so on the other income, just would point out that interest rates are doing really well. But here again, we've adopted a conservative stance and budgeted very conservatively for interest income. We budgeted $5 million for interest income, but we expect if the economy continues to do well and the Fed holds the rates where they're at, we'll do better, and we'll see the results of that next year. So as we come down the projected revenue column, we see at the bottom that we're going to project $158,154,190 in total revenue, supporting next year's budget. That's an increase of only $11,056, but that is a little bit deceiving because we're pulling out the HERF lost revenue recovery. So actually the budget looks really good, I think. So if you'll keep that $158,154,190 in mind, that is going to be the projected revenue you're going to see on coming slides. So when we take those revenues and look at them on this chart here, we see that property taxes is still the highest, $70,122,166 in first place, the largest revenue source, followed by state appropriations at 25.72% of the budget, and then tuition and fees, 23.82%, followed by other income, self-supporting programs, and overhead recovery. So these are the components of the revenue part of the budget. So then we move to the expenditure side of the budget, and what you see before you is the baseline budget by executive area. And so it compares the baseline budget that Ms. Deas' office has been working hard at producing, and it compares it to the adopted budget for 22-23. So we see how the current year compares to the coming year. And so we see a decrease of $11,916,389, and that is largely in the financial and administrative row here. And that's because we're losing the budget for HERF lost recovery. To balance the budget, we had to have an expenditure side and revenue side. So we're pulling out the HERF lost recovery budget here. And that's why you see such a large decrease in that line item. The difference from the 11.1 we pulled out is $812,000, and that reflects the movement of positions in the baseline budget. The baseline budget is going down lower because people have retired, have left the college, or they may have been replaced, and when they're replaced at the highest of the entry level. So that has produced a lower budget going forward.
So we need more teachers to retire.
No, sir. But anyway, this reflects the movement in positions and the removal of the HERF lost revenue budget. So this baseline budget of $146,226,745, you're going to see on the next slide, because that's the budget number we're going to roll forward. So here you see the $146,226,745, and you see the functional areas that it's distributed in. So the largest area is instruction, and that's exactly what should be the largest pot of money going to, and followed by institutional support at $42,115,512, and then after that, the largest functional area is academic support, $17,681,505, followed by operations and maintenance, student services, transfers, self-supporting, and public service research. So this is how the budget breaks down by functional area. And these are the expense categories of that baseline budget. So, of course, the largest expenditures are in salaries. So when you add up what's in staff salaries of $44,709,349 to what's in faculty salaries of $51,750,742, plus the benefits of $14.2 million, that represents about 76% of our budget. That's about $110 million. So that's about 76% of the budget. Next, we get to the
We have full-time faculty. The staff is a committed contract. Part-time is a plus or minus by semester, right?
That's correct.
So this next slide shows some additional funding requests for consideration. The critical needs are things that we have to have, increases that we cannot control. Central Appraisal District fees, they're increasing their budget, so they pass that on to the taxing entities. Insurance increases are projected to need $339,063 more. The graduation support needed, I think UTEP is raising their rent for that facility, and plus our registrar area wants to augment the services that we provide during graduation, so that's a $75,000. We just renegotiated a contract with the custodial firm, so it has resulted in an increase of $275,000 to that custodial contract. And facilities and maintenance has to do some locksmith work at the various campuses. So Mr. Lobato needs $25,000 more for that. And electricity rates have gone up 9.6%. And we have additional square footage in the district.
Have we looked at any, the government seems to be just pumping money into solar, just giving money away. Have we looked at that at all?
I don't know the answer to
I
that.
mean, they give out money like it's, you don't even have to pay money down to get solar on your house. They just put it up there. There's no money out of your pocket. There's no,
Yeah.
We'll follow up with Mr. Lobato, Judge.
I mean, it's
I'm sure
it's
he's-
$250,000 that we're paying every year. And it just, if the government's giving away money, why aren't we taking it? They're giving it to everybody else, we might as well.
We'll follow up with Mr. Lovato about that. So software maintenance, there's some built-in increases in the agreements that we have. And so this is compensating for those scheduled software increases that we're projecting to need for next year as well. And so the critical needs total $1,202,970. The next section are other funding requests from the various executive levels. And so this is, by executive level, what we're requesting for other additional funding requests.
Are these hard figures, or are we gonna see changes the next meeting?
So I met with each of the vice presidents, and we were able to reduce some of these requests, Judge. I believe that we were over 3 million at the last budget workshop that we presented to the board. We were able to bring it down. From my perspective, this is pretty solid on what we'll be able to, what we're requesting from
So
you.
we're not gonna see any big variance?
I don't believe that you'll see large variance in here.
And we see another page in here that's a breakdown of those categories.
Absolutely.
I mean, somebody can break down why they did $1.4 million.
Absolutely. And I'd ask Dr. Smith to chime in, but we're looking at, for instance, we're looking at mental health offerings for our students. It has always been a big area of the institution in demand, but in particular during the pandemic, we saw this increase. As you're aware, when we went to Amarillo College, Judge Haggerty, yourself, and I, and observed what they were doing, our intention was to always put that in place. The pandemic obviously delayed that. We're ready to move forward with social service interventions for our students. But Dr. Smith, please, I ask you to chime in as well.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, both for the board and for my colleagues who probably think I'm hogging all the money and trying to get all the So as Dr. Serrata alluded to, there are 4 big initiatives that we've asked, largely Dr. Mitchell, in her area to fund. One is the social services mental health effort. 2 is we're continuing to institutionalize the first-year experience centers. And you may recall several years ago, we got a huge grant to set those up, stand those up, and fund them. Now it's on the institution to continue those. So that's a big part of that. So the social services part is almost $600,000. First-year experience is about $200,000. We've got the behavioral intervention team money in there as well. And then the final component, which is, I believe, another $200,000, is the Veterans Resource Centers that Dr. Mitchell has been asked to right-size those for our veterans and their dependents. So about half of this money that's in instruction is actually more district-level services to students.
Is this personnel costs?
Largely personnel costs. There's some equipment and furniture costs. No, I'm sorry, that's in a different pot of money. So most of this is employee costs.
So this is gonna be figured in the budget from there on out, so this figure is gonna be built into the...
Correct, yeah.
It's not gonna go down, it's gonna increase the budget.
Well, we won't come back because it will have been built into the budget if the board approves that.
I won't expect to see 1.4 next year. Is that what you're saying?
Do you want to see it higher?
No, you're
That's
gonna,
exactly right.
you're just gonna build it in.
Yeah, this is a little bit of an unusual circumstance because of the nature of the programs that we're standing up.
Okay.
So the total other funding requests are $2,559,114. You'll see these 2 amounts on the next slide that's going to summarize the revenues, expenditures, other funding requests, and critical needs. So this next slide kind of incorporates everything we've covered for 23-24. The first row, projected revenues, we talked about those on the previous slide, $158,154,190. The preliminary budget, we talked about that, $146,226,745, resulting in a preliminary budget surplus of $11,927,445. We just spoke about the $1,202,970 critical needs. This first column depicts a 1% salary increase, and so that cost would be $929,050, resulting in a budget surplus before additional funding requests of $9,795,425. You didn't have these two amounts on the previous slides when we did this in June. Now we've added additional funding requests to this, and so it gives us a clearer picture going forward of what's available. So then the additional funding request down here, we just spoke about $2,559,114, resulting in a budget surplus of $7,236,311. This is the 1% column. So what I'd like to do at this point is proceed along the budget surplus before additional funding across all the percentages here, so you can have a good idea of what each percentage will yield as far as a budget surplus. So for the 2%, it results in $8,866,375. Additional funding request of 2.5, resulting in a budget surplus of $6,307,261. For the 3% salary increase, it would result in a surplus of $5,378,211. That would carry a salary enhancement cost of $2,787,150 at 3%. In the 4% column, the cost of a salary increase would be $3,716,200, resulting in a surplus of $4,449,161. In the 5% column, the cost of a salary increase would be $4,645,250, resulting in a budget surplus of $3,520,111. And in the last column, if we did a 6% salary increase, it would have a cost of $5,574,300, resulting in a budget surplus of $2,591,061. We are recommending the 4% column because of the way that the new appropriation has changed. The new appropriation is now on an annual basis, and so it cannot be relied on for 2 years anymore. At the end of 1 year, at the end of that year, we're going to have to recalculate the appropriation estimate for the following year. So we recommend carrying a biennium reserve of $4,449,161 in case our performance metrics don't come in. I think that they will, but really it would be prudent till we go through this, budget conservatively, put it into a biennium reserve in case our metrics don't come in case we need to use that. So our recommendation, because of that, only because of that, and we feel that 4% is good recognition to our staff and employees for all the hard work that they do. But because of the change in the funding model, we recommend the 4%.
I think I'm inclined to go with a 6% with the expectation that the staff will rise to the occasion, and if they don't, then the following year we don't have the increase in salaries.
The only danger to that would be if we didn't meet that, then the next budget would be short.
Right.
Because the appropriation wouldn't come
But
in.
everybody would be on notice that if we don't meet that, it's because people didn't work hard enough to get us
So why don't
there.
we just give them a
One time.
50% raise?
We could.
We can get more work out of them. If that's your logic here. The man's
That's not
telling
my
you,
logic, that's my
the man's telling
expectation.
you have to be conservative because this is a new program in the state of Texas. And we don't know how it's gonna come out. And he's telling you, you better have some money to cover it if we don't meet it. But your argument is if we pay him more money, we're gonna bring in more money.
No, we're behind, so we need to catch up a little bit more on our
Who are we
salaries.
behind with? We're the only college in town. Who are we behind, who are we competing with?
The other employers around the city and county.
Wait a minute. We're gonna compare degree teachers to business managers and everything else in totally separate industry. We're gonna make them compare some salaries. Why would we compare education to Walmart executives?
I'm not comparing them to Walmart executive, to people that come in. But you know what, you have your opinion. If you think that
Well, I'm just
they're going
expressing-
What would you
below.
say? We don't understand.
Hold on. If you think they're going below and going with a 4%, then you vote on that. I have my opinion too.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand
And
your
I'm not
logic.
attacking your logic.
Well,
If
no,
you
I'm
want to
not.
go with a 1%, I'm not going to attack your logic. I'm
Just-
just expressing my opinion.
Yeah, I don't understand your rationale, but you're welcome to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I think we should follow the recommendation of the people that work
Then
here.
you vote that way.
I will.
Okay.
But I just think that's logical. If the man over there tells you that this is what we should do, I think that weighs a lot on what we should do, personally. So when it comes up to a vote, we'll vote for it.
Well, I happen to believe that we should go with the 6%.
Okay, well, we're not voting now, so when it comes up.
Okay, all of
we'll-
us will vote our conscience,
Yeah.
and I think that we have excellent employees that deserve.
I don't think anybody.
And I
here
think that the
can
budget
deny that.
allows it. So, anyway, that's my point of view.
Okay, but he's just telling you that this is all preliminary because we've gone to a new funding system and that you better be prepared if the money doesn't come in.
Do you think it's sustainable?
That's the only thing I'm saying.
At 6%, is that sustainable? Is that something that, because it's not I mean, we could do a 4% and then a one-time incentive, we don't call it bonus, right? But can we sustain 6%? If that
Dr.
was-
Serrata, what do you,
It really depends on the outcome. So a couple of things. We have been laser focused on student success for a significant period of time. And so that's why the results of the state appropriation see a 22.6% increase to El Paso Community College. We're right at the level of the state. Now, there's amongst the top 10, as Mr. Flores indicated, we're ranked fourth amongst the top 10. There's a couple of colleges that did slightly better than us, but by and large, our focus on student success, yes, our focus on student success has proven fruitful. My concern is that we're looking at, we're still dealing with the results of the enrollment declines during the pandemic. So if we look at the enrollment declines, those will inherently have an impact on the outcomes. You don't bring in as many students, you're not going to be as successful, or you have a smaller number to be successful with. So we did see a decline in the number of graduates this last year. I don't know if we'll see that stabilize and start to grow the number of graduates once again. And if that's the case, then we'll see an increase in appropriations. I tend to agree with Mr. Flores. From my recommendation, it would be a 4% across the board for our faculty and staff. That is above the current CPI for inflation. It's at about 3.6% currently. You can blame me. I voted for I sit on the Federal Reserve Board, El Paso branch of the Federal Reserve Bank. I voted for the interest rate increase. I would imagine that'll hold steady this next in September, but there may be another interest rate increase. The economy is very robust right now. It's growing too fast, and so we have to stabilize that. And we've seen the results. Interest rates have come down. And so from my perspective, the board has been extremely generous to our faculty and staff. We did 2% in '21. You followed that up with 5% last year. And in between that, you did 3 one-time payments for full-time staff that would equate to 6.5% if you're at $100,000. So that's 13.5% over the 3-year period. And then you'd be looking at that would be 17.5% over a 4-year period. That's more than 4% annually. That's just my perspective. Plus, Mr. Flores is right. My concern is I'm already thinking about next year's budget. I know we haven't passed this year's budget, but it's my responsibility, and Mr. Flores and his teams, to think about next year's budget. So that's where I am. I work for the board. The board chooses to do what they see in the best interests of our employees. But that's where I am right now.
Do you recall any other year when the budgets have looked so good?
No, ma'am. That's fair. I don't. Yeah.
But I can't
And this-
recall where they changed the funding system.
Yeah, but
Last
you were
year.
on the board then.
I know.
He's not been on
In
since
in
7.
29 years, they haven't changed the whole way that they're doing this. And I'm telling you, you better be prepared
Now,
in
let
case
me-
we don't get the numbers.
I will make one more remark for the board's consideration. This is without a tuition increase or without a tax increase.
Correct.
We have not touched either of those. We did tuition last in the spring of '20 before we ever knew a pandemic was going to hit. The board voted on that in February of 2020. We moved forward with a tuition increase. We have not increased tuition since then, and we have not touched taxes since 2018. So, and by the way, Mr. Flores hasn't mentioned it, but our tax rate has come down from 14.1 to 11.5 cents based on the growth and the increase in property values. And so we are putting forth a no new revenue. We're not doing what the city does, and we're not touching taxes. We're bringing it all the way down to the level that it should be. So we haven't touched either of those. Tuition, it'll be at 4 years. Taxes, it would be 5 years. And our recommendation is not to touch either at this point.
Okay. What else you got?
So, last time we looked at the 4-year model, and so this is an abbreviated slide related to that. And so we've moved towards updating that model. We're still tweaking it. And so the model covers 2 legislative periods, a 4-year period. And so it covers 2 tuition increases in there, should that be needed for some large expenditure, like a market study, salary study. Some what-if scenarios can be modeled in that. And it assumes steady valuation increases with potential tax rate increase to cover a salary study, if the board were so inclined, and assumes annual salary increases. So we've tweaked that model. I don't know if there's any interest in looking at that, or what is the board's desire?
Yeah, I'd like to look at it.
Okay. So what's in yellow reflects our current operations. It reflects a beginning revenues of $164,944,000. But before that, it starts with our fund balance, because budget and budget surpluses eventually roll into fund balance. And so fund balance is a very important aspect of an operation. SACS looks at your, SACS COC looks at your fund balance, rating agencies look at your fund balance. Plus, it's somewhere, in case of an emergency, you want to maintain it at certain levels. Typically, auditors recommend fund balances at about 15%. Rating agencies look at 25%, keeping a fund balance. So just some background about fund balance. So in this model, we start with the estimated with the actual $134,578,663 fund balance at the beginning of this fiscal year. And then we project revenues for 22-23 at 164,649,000. Expenditures at 134,762,358. And these are the amounts that you saw on the previous slide in the budget presentation. So they're consistent with that. That would result in an estimated increase of $29,887,586. So then, when we have that money at the end of the year, we talked about supporting the capital projects, multi-improvement plans that we have. So we would look to transfer $8 million to project reserve in support of capital projects. And then just in case, because we never know what GASBs are going to hit us with, we would cover the GASBs with budget surplus. So that is factored into here. And so it would result in a preliminary fund balance increase of $17,767,586 that would be available to roll into fund balance.
So what percentage would that be?
So that's a great question, Dr. Graham, because we compute the percentages here. So what happens is that 17 rolls forward and it creates a new fund balance of 152. And so what do we do with that in terms of percentages? So then consider that our budget is $158,143,134, and we opt to have 15% of that to meet the auditor's requirement, okay? And then recall I mentioned that the rating agencies would like to see 25. Yes, ma'am. So then that fund balance of 158 represents 96% of our budget, okay? So of that, the 152 new fund balance, we would take 15% of that and say that's earmarked for the recommended auditor level, 15%, which is $23,723,000. So we got that covered now, right? And then so we subtract that from the balance rolling forward, results in $128,623,000. And then we consider right now on our books, we absorbed like $112 million related to GASB 68 and 75. So we have to consider that. We have to cover that. Otherwise, we'd be in a negative position if we didn't cover that. So that reduces the amount rolling forward to $15,617,104 that is not accounted for at this point. That we would consider as to cover, to have a fund balance available in case of some emergency. So we add the 15 to the 23, and so we would get up to the 39,304,232, which would put us at 24.9% of our budget, very close to the rating agency desired fund balance level. So that's a little roll forward scenario how the budget surplus would result in an increase to the fund balance, giving consideration to the two GASBs, and then supporting the 15% and the 25% fund balance levels that are recommended. So in this model, we put in a scenario that here under budgeted expenses in year 24-25, if we had a market study and it cost us $7 million. So if that market study cost us $7 million, how do we cover that? So in this model for 24-25, we've also modeled in a 3% salary enhancement for that year. And so the cost of that would be $2,898,000. So now we have to cover $2,898,000. We have to cover the $7 million salary study. And then critical needs. You know, I mean,
Elevators.
things we have to do. So we just threw an amount there. We don't know what that is. This is already in the future, right? So $500,000. And so how would we cover that? So in this model, Ms. Zuniga, who prepared this, modeled in a tuition increase of $10 to resident students and then $14 to non-resident students. So that resulted in tuition revenue increase of $3,031,315 by increasing tuition $10 and $14 to students. So that raised some revenue there. And then we said, well, since the tax rate has been driven down, as Dr. Serrata pointed out, because of valuations and new property, now we have some capacity in the tax revenue area, because by driving that down, we increased our capacity. By driving the tax rate down this year, we increased our capacity by $21 million, because our tax rate has gone down from 12.26 cents to the 11.57 cents. So that has increased capacity up to the 15 cents cap that we have. So now we have 21 million in capacity going forward.
That's sort of bogus because we never have considered, you won't let me consider the 15%.
Yeah, that's accurate, Mr. Archer. So, I mean, if the 15% is a hard cap, if we were to look at, if we got closer, if we reached the 15% and we weren't able to generate the revenue we needed, then we'd be looking at personnel issues. Number one. Number two, we have an 8% maximum increase to the tax rate currently. I'd remind everyone that counties and cities went down to 2.5, or was it 4? That they were cut. We were exempted from that cut. Although Senator Betancourt, I'm sure, still remembers our exemption to that. Right now, we have the ability to tax up to 8% without voter approval, and so that 21 million is, I want to say, isn't it 30 or 40% increase to the tax rate?
It would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
So we wouldn't be able to do it in
voter
1 year
approval.
regardless.
It would.
Nor would I ever recommend that.
But this model is hypothetical.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, where in this model do we see the increase if our students come up with excellent performances? They probably will.
So that's a great question.
Tuition.
Thank you for asking that
Where
question.
is it gonna go?
So right here, on this enrollment growth or decline line, if you said that there was a 1% increase to enrollment, this would calculate that. So I could put that number in there and you could see what it would generate. Couldn't Diana?
So we're getting the students, so we have extra $3 million, so we'll get that $30 million, but taking more money from the students.
This is an hypothetical. If you
Just
said,
from the hypothetical, I mean, yeah, I understand that. I mean, I helped you build this thing, so I know
Yes, sir.
what you're talking about.
okay,
But I'm talking more about the outcomes-based funding that would come our way, the additional, not necessarily on the enrollment, but on the
Appropriation.
positive outcomes that we're going to produce.
so what we would do here in this model where it says additional state funding, we would add a value that we might project for that. But we don't know what that is. But we would, if we had an idea, we thought we were getting more, we could hypothetically put that in here as well.
Where do we think we are right now on outcome performance? Overall, we're doing 60% of what we theoretically could do. We're 80% good. We're 15% below. What?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mr. Exer. We're continuing to analyze the formula. I mean, I'll give you an example. So currently, the 15 semester credit hours of dual credit accounts for 10.7% of our overall performance-based funding. Then you look at the transfers to a general academic institution. That accounts currently for 28.3% of our overall funding. So we'd have to measure these. These are the baseline. So we don't know. We can go back, and Dr. Penley and her team will work on going back and calculating what we had been at, and then going forward and calculating where we think we can get to.
You don't have a gut feeling as to where 80% capacity or 20%?
From my perspective, we have much room to improve, and I think that we can.
Okay.
So in this particular example, what has happened is we've modeled for 8% tax increase, generated $5,697,552. And we modeled for a tuition increase, generated $3,031,115. Every year we get revenue, additional revenue from new property.
Oh, yeah.
So we put that in here. So our new revenue total for that year would be $168,525,514. On the expenditure side, what do we added in this model? We added the hypothetical cost for a market study of $7 million as a hypothetical, a salary increase of 3%, and then critical needs, resulting in a budget of $160 million.
Where's the figure for how much it's gonna cost when they come back and say we have to give you all $50,000 each when you do that study?
It's the $7 million.
Yeah.
The $7 million
$7 million is what it's gonna cost total?
to implement it. This is a hypothetical. I don't know what a study like that costs.
What did it cost last time we did?
3.2,
How much?
3.2 if I'm not mistaken,
So why did we come up with 7?
inflation.
Inflation. I was waiting to hear COLA.
It's a
I was waiting to hear COLA.
It's purely hypothetical, Judge.
I was just wondering how you came up with these figures.
We could change it to 3.
Well, I know, we can do all kinds of stuff with pie in the sky. We
Yeah.
can change all kinds of figures.
Yeah.
Gotta have a reason
What
to put
figure
number
did you
down.
use, what figure did you use for new construction in that year?
For
The
new.
new taxes, how much construction is gonna be?
Oh, sure, 1,642,000.
And how did you come up with that figure?
That's a figure that's rolling forward based upon what we're getting now.
So
Ask
you're
about-
expecting all this new construction next year at the same price? Another 1.6 million?
Yes.
Have you been on the east side?
We have consistently been bringing
I don't
in.
go to the east side as much as possible. I stay out of God's country. I know this.
That's where the growth is.
Yeah, these are all hypothetical.
Yes.
You know, That's great.
Absolutely.
I don't
That's-
understand before we get growth yet, they said the population is decreasing.
Yeah,
I don't understand that, that doesn't.
the population is actually growing slightly, but we continue to see new construction, new homes, et cetera.
And those companies that are building those huge buildings, do we get money from them?
We do. We do, we receive tax revenue from
And there's
those.
more coming up?
So that, just a quick demonstration of,
So you're telling us we're in great shape.
We are in
I
great shape.
think we are. I think there's some financial indicators that the coordinating puts together for all colleges, and we come out with a really good rating for that, actually.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's the work you all do.
Let me just, I'll beat the same drum that I keep beating it. We're in great shape, but we don't make this money. The state takes the money in taxes, and the local people take money from us in taxes. And then we take money from the students in taxes. In other words, we keep taking money from everybody else. So it's not really our money.
That's how it's set up.
Well, that's how it's set up, but we need to understand,
That's
honor
right.
the people that are paying it, okay?
We try to. That's why we're elected.
Obviously,
We
we are.
represent the taxpayer.
Well, I don't know, when you put in an 8% tax increase, all of a sudden that, I know you just choose that, it's hypothetical. I know I built the thing, I built this thing. Where's the 6-year model that you and I worked on, okay? I understand we put that in, but I think it's a little bit when they say, okay, we have a 21 base, you'll never reach the $21 million. Give me a realistic number, okay? So it's gonna be less than that. But again, where does this money come from? Where does this money
It
come
comes
from? It
from-
comes from you and I that pay a little
It
bit
comes
more
from
for
three
gas
sources. It comes
and
from
bread.
three sources. Taxes, tuition.
Yeah, and who pays the taxes? You and I do when we go to the
Everybody
grocery store.
does.
The
Okay.
employees that you want to give a 4%.
All these employees pay tax, we all pay taxes.
Yeah, so,
And tuition is for the students, and then the state.
I understand that, but it's not the money we make. We don't generate, we use other people's money. Okay?
Well, we do get a raise. The state gave us a raise this year in appropriations. Did they not give us more money this year? No.
They gave us money, we didn't make it.
Well, we're not here to make money. We're here to run an institution.
Yeah, that's right.
To educate the students.
Okay,
We're
if
not
we-
here to make money.
If we're not here to make money, then let's just decrease the budget down to what it costs. Let's don't project a revenue increase.
Like,
I like the projections, thank you.
So, no, I mean, that's enough. We just need to honor where this money comes from.
we do every year. That's why we come to these meetings, and that's why we hash this out. So we are protecting the taxpayer, protecting the students,
Okay.
and we're paying the people that produce the students. Now, granted, sometimes you don't like what we give them, but that's just the way it goes. But that's why we all come here, so we hash this out.
Are we increasing the budget for recruitment? Dr. Lee?
Yes, Dr. Graham, I worked with, as Dr. Sadata mentioned, that we had our budget development meetings, and Dr. Sadata and I worked out, along with our Director of Recruitment, budget assistant for next year.
So you've got an unlimited budget?
No, ma'am.
Go ahead, Mr. Flores.
So next steps. Considerations, approval of salary enhancement, recommendation by the Board of Trustees,
Not today.
not today,
That would be on
but going
30th.
forward.
Is it gonna be on the 30th?
It'll be on the
17th.
agenda, we can vote for it.
Yeah, we would, if the board's so inclined, we would recommend that the board consider that and approve that next week on the 17th. The only reason is we have our regular board meeting scheduled for the 30th, which is right up against the start of the new term. So all of our team, in particular in human resources and in payroll, need those 2 weeks to be able to get that in place.
Finalize the revenue projections based on final appropriations from the state. August 22nd is their deadline to push the final numbers to us. Acceptance of the certified appraisal roll, that'll be done at schedule for the August 30th board meeting. Adoption of the FY 23-24 budget at the August 30th board meeting. Recommendation of a 2023 tax rate to board on August 30th. Roll the budget into our ERP system banner on September 1, and September 1 is the start of the new fiscal years. And so, special thanks to everybody here. A lot of people put in bits and pieces. It really is a village. Ms. Tejas, Ms. Zuniga on projections. Juanita Martinez in Josette's old office does a lot of work for the presentations and everything. A lot of people. Dr. Serata, all of you with your input to us. We try to put together a sustainable budget based upon conservative revenue projections. That's what I think we have presented to you today. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have one item, Mr. Ortega?
There is one item.
Yes, and I need to let Ms. Sanchez know.
We have to what?
Thank you, sir, that's
Thank you.
good information.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my piece. Could you read that other one, Bill, 5.2?
Yes. Item 5.2, discuss and take possible action in a personnel matter in the Division of Student and Enrollment Services. Would the board like to go into executive session?
There's possible action. Yeah, personal, we have to go to executive session.
Just wait,
Yeah.
I'll walk with you.
Go ahead and read it.
Some get lost their phone now. You can't get out.
The Board of Trustees may conduct an executive or closed session pursuant to Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code for one or more of the following reasons. 1, consultation with its attorney to seek or receive legal advice or consultation regarding pending or contemplated litigation or for any purpose authorized by law. 2, discussion about the value or transfer of real property. 3, discussion about a prospective gift or donation. 4, consideration of specific personnel matters. 5, discussion about security personnel or devices. Or 6, discussion of certain economic development matters. The board may also announce that it will go into executive session on any item listed on this agenda if the subject matter is permitted for a closed session by provisions of Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. Any vote regarding these items shall be taken in open session. Item 6.1, discuss with legal counsel a personnel matter in the Division of Student and Enrollment Services in accordance with Texas Government Code,
Thank you.
Section 551.074. Now 5:39.
Thank you. No, I'm gonna eat right now. I should get that in.
All right, we're back in session. Bell, read 6.2.
Item
I
5.
mean, down at the bottom. real quick.
5.2, discuss and take possible action in a personnel matter in the Division of Student and Enrollment Services.
No action. No action.
No action.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye. I second.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Be back here the 17th.
Monday.